Alrighty, hello YouTube. Welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Cryptic Coil, and in today's video, I have a book review for you. The book that I will be reviewing is titled The Grave by Christopher Pike. Real quick, I actually meant to review this book last year when I read it for Old School April. I had a whole video on my channel. I participated solo in the Old School April event that Kelsey from Slime and Slashers hosts. I didn't join any of the teams. I just took components from her Old School April prompts, and I just enjoyed it on my own as a lone wolf. And this was one of the books that I read for that event, and I could have sworn I reviewed this book already. And but I guess I didn't. I think I meant to, and I just didn't get around to it. And then I somehow felt like I did. And then when I searched for the review on my channel, I couldn't find it. So I went ahead and I didn't. I pretty much reread it. I did reread it fast by skimming like every page. There were some sections where I was like, wait a minute, I need to really reread this. So it was pretty much a reread for me, because I really wanted to do a review of this book and have it up on my channel. Anyway, let me take a sip of my coffee. This was another coffee mug that I found at a thrift store. A buddy of mine was asking me, he was like, dude, how do you find stuff like that all the time? And I was like, I don't know, I just get lucky. I mean, I go hunting. I mean, you know, you're never gonna get lucky out in the wild if you don't go out in the wild and look around. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump into this review. Okay, so first let's look at the cover of the book. Okay, so there's a graveyard at night, and you see this mirror image of a young lady, and on this side she looks, frightened, and then on this side you see the same young lady, but she looks demonically possessed or perhaps undead. So this is a very cool looking cover. I love the use of greens because the use of the color green on this adds like a really eerie feel to the book or to the cover. And the tagline on the front reads, "Eternal life and eternal death." Now, this particular novel, The Grave, was released in 1999. But let's go ahead and read the synopsis on the back. The synopsis on the back reads, "The grave is not the end of the story. It begins with an innocent young man being led deep into the woods by a mysterious young lady. There, he is attacked by a cruel cult, stripped of his clothes, thrown naked into a coffin, and buried alive to the sound of strange chants. It continues with a pretty girl meeting a fascinating guy. A guy who is not like other guys, who hardly seems to blink or breathe, and who emits a cool presence even in the midday sun. It ends in a nightmare, in a weird realm of existence where life and death mirror each other, where the grave no longer promises any escape from pleasure or pain." So, if there was ever a synopsis on the back of a book that made the book sound compelling, it would be this. So, for the sake of this book review, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to detail the first 3 chapters, because those first 3 chapters really lay out the plot and everything else in the novel that is to follow. And I don't want to give away spoilers. Like, I want you to be able to read this book and not feel like you know where everything is going because you watched my review. If out of everything that I've ever read by Christopher Pike, minus the Spooksville series, if I had to recommend one adult novel from him that I've read, it would be this one. So if you never read any other young adult Christopher Pike novel, I would highly encourage you to read this one, The Grave. So in chapter one, we meet a 20-year-old young man by the name of Ted Lovett. He works construction. He doesn't know what he wants to do with his life. And then Ted meets a young lady around the same age as him named Dara Smith. And Ted becomes obsessed with her. I think Christopher Pike describes his attraction to Dara as obsessive, and later on in the novel, looking back, there was another character that described Ted's attraction to Dara as obsessive as well. And Dara tried to warn him. She told him, "I'm no good for you, and if you knew what was good for you, you'd take off running." But Ted heard what he wanted to hear. He believed what he wanted to believe. He rationalized it the way he wanted to rationalize it. I think it was Maya Angelou who once said, "When people tell you who they are, believe them." I was in a situation like that once. This woman that I was very, very attracted to, and I'll admit it, obsessed with, told me the same thing. She said, "I'm no good for you." I should have listened. Anyway, so I could relate to Ted here. Anyway, Ted rationalized it in a way where he was like, "Oh, okay, I get it. You're a bad girl. You know, you're aloof and cool and mysterious. I get it. Okay." And he was like, "I'm still attracted to you, whatever." Well, she was so aloof and mysterious that she sometimes didn't return his phone calls. And when she did, it wasn't always in a timely manner. And so while he's waiting to hear back from her, uh, all he's doing is thinking about her. And then she would hit him up once in a while and they'd go out. Well, after they'd gone out a couple of times, she wanted to take him out to the woods. So she brings him out to the woods. And she explains to him that where they're going is like an ancient Indian burial ground. And then these people emerge from the trees wearing hooded robes. And I think some of them even have torches. And someone goes up behind him, puts him in a chokehold. They inject him with some kind of a drug. Then they strip him of his clothing. They lift him up like Tobey Maguire and Spider-Man, start passing him through the crowd of these hooded robed figures. And he gets stabbed in the ribs or something like that. And they lay him in a coffin. And they start chanting. And before they nail his casket shut, Dara pulls out a peppermint and tosses it into his coffin. And I remember reading that chapter and thinking, like, wow, that was a really cool scene, tossing in a peppermint. Like, I don't understand the significance of that, but there's something about it that I just think works. Well, they end up burying Ted alive, to die, to bleed out and stuff. And they put his coffin in the ground, and he can hear the dirt being shoveled on top of the casket that they nailed shut that he's going to be buried in. And that symbol of the peppermint reoccurs a couple of times throughout the novel. It reoccurs again in the last couple pages of the novel, which I thought was really cool. So those like white and red peppermints, I'm never going to look at them the same again. That was like iconic to me. All right, so then in chapter 2, we end up meeting another young lady named Carrie Weir. And Carrie is a 17-year-old high school senior. And Carrie comes from a very troubled past. She's experienced some family tragedies. The first of which was her elder sister Deborah having died 2 years prior. I don't remember how Deborah died, and it doesn't even matter. But her older sister had died 2 years prior. Around the same time that her elder sister died, their hotshot father, he was a hotshot lawyer. He had run off with his sexy young secretary. And so, with the death of her elder sister and with her father running off, Carrie was left alone with her mother. And due to everything that has happened within their family, Carrie's mother developed a horrible drug addiction. A horrible drug addiction. Okay, throughout the next couple chapters, when they started to explore Carrie's mother's drug addiction further and how it affected Carrie, I mean, my heart was just broken. Okay, and that's, something that Christopher Pike can do really well. There are, aspects of Christopher Pike's writing that have always made me want to come back for more. Okay, so in the same way that Carrie's mother developed a drug addiction as a child, I developed an addiction for Christopher Pike's writing that has lasted into middle age. I mean, who would have thunk that when I got my first Christopher Pike book in third grade, that I'd be, pushing 40 years old still reading Christopher Pike. Okay, who would have thunk? All right, anyway. So also in chapter 2, we meet Carrie's boyfriend. His name is Clay. And Clay comes from a well-to-do family. They have money, and Clay worships the ground that Carrie walks on. He would do anything for her. He would move heaven and earth if he needed to. Unfortunately, Carrie doesn't feel the same way about Clay. And one of the cool things is that Carrie shows some self-awareness throughout the novel about Clay, because as the reader, I felt very sympathetic for Clay, because I remember when I was a young man and I was Clay. I remember all those times that I didn't, take the hint, and I didn't accept the reality that, she just wasn't that into me, and no, it's not going to get better. Like, if I just keep doing what I'm doing, no, she's not going to come around. Okay, that sort of thing. I felt a lot of sympathy for Clay, but I also felt a lot of frustration. And then I started to feel like a hypocrite, because it's like, wait a minute, I only know these things because I'm old now and I've been through it a number of times, and I'm old enough to have learned from my mistakes. So I felt kind of bad for wanting to wring Clay's little neck. So I felt sympathy for him, but I also felt a lot of frustration because of him. And Carrie showed some self awareness, and she, talked about it quite a bit throughout the novel, with internal monologues and whatnot. Well, then later in chapter 2, Carrie meets another guy. His name is Oscar. They have a brief encounter, but they start talking. They start getting to know each other, and Oscar comes off as this like really mysterious guy. And there's just something about him that just really fascinates Carrie, and Carrie feels really compelled by him. Carrie learns that this Oscar guy is 20 years old. He's a successful artist. He makes a living selling black and white paintings, and he owns his own beachfront condo at the age of 20. Well, after they have that first encounter, Carrie just cannot stop thinking about this Oscar guy. It consumes her, and it causes her to push Clay away even more than what she usually does. Then, about a week later, she has a second encounter with Oscar, and she starts dropping hints that she would like to go out with him and see him again. And he takes the hint and he invites her back to his place. So she goes back to his place and she checks out his condo. It's on the beach. He also owns this 40-foot powerboat, and it had a very impressive computer system on board. That very impressive for the year 1999, might I add. At the age of 20, imagine being that successful. Anyway, so he takes her out onto the water, and it's nighttime, so you have the moonlight reflecting off the water and you have the stars, and they're out there on the ocean away from everything, and it's this beautiful romantic scenery, and Carrie's just so taken by this Oscar guy. They end up, quote unquote, making love on the boat, because of course they do. And Christopher Pike concludes chapter 3 by saying that unbeknownst to Carrie, she had just made love to death itself. That's pretty much where I'm going to end the description of the plot. I will say that later on in the novel, when they referenced that night and that encounter between Carrie and Oscar, we find out that they actually went at it like 6 times that night on the boat. Carrie didn't make it home until there was already daylight in the morning. But yeah, 6 times. Wow. Okay. I don't think I had that kind of stamina when I was 20. I mean, I'm almost twice that age, and I still don't think I have that kind of stamina. 6 times? Good for them. That's kind of Christopher Pike for you, though. Anyway, yeah, so I'll just briefly kind of tell you a little bit more. The book went on to kind of talk about life and death. It was very everything that happened in these first 3 chapters, they all tie into the plot. There were some twists and some turns. One of the twists, I was lying in bed reading the book, and when I got to this one part, something really unexpected happened, and I sat up in bed and I blurted out loud, "What?" Like, just blew me away. I really, really, really enjoyed the first 2/3 of this novel. I mean, it just had me hooked, begging for more. I couldn't wait to finish the book because I was just turning these pages, just in awe of the story that I'm indulged in. By the time we got to the final third of the novel, I was just really curious to see where it was going. It started to turn more into like an action kind of story, and there were it was actually during that final third of the novel where I had that moment where I sat up in bed and said, "What?" Before I end this video, let me just tell you what I ranked this book. Out of how many stars would I give it out of 5? I give it 4 stars. I was tempted to give it 4.5 stars. I was tempted to give it 5 stars. I can't do that. I give it 4 stars because I think that the story was really good. There are parts of the story that Christopher Pike told very well, like that scene out on the boat when Carrie and Oscar hooked up. I mean, just I felt like I was on that boat. Like, I felt like I was reading that book on a boat with the moonlight reflecting off the water and the stars were all out. It just there were scenes like that just had me hooked. Chapter 1, during the satanic ritual sacrifice of Ted, I felt like I was there. Like, I had goosebumps. There were some just moments in the story that were just so vivid that I felt like I was there. And so there were parts of the story that were just told really, really well by Christopher Pike. However, by the time I finished the novel, Christopher Pike did this thing that he does where, he leaves things ambiguous and not really in the best way possible. That there's a way to, leave something ambiguous. I think that the movie Pan's Labyrinth did a really good job of that by Guillermo del Toro. I don't think that Christopher Pike's ambiguity is quite as artistically impactful as he might get credit for. Sometimes the ambiguity of his storytelling leaves me feeling really frustrated because I feel like all he has to do is just add his young adult novels are short enough. If he had to add another 2 or 3 pages to give some, answers that will leave me feeling satisfactory in the conclusion, then I mean, I'll read an extra couple of pages, I'll read an extra chapter, whatever it takes. But he leaves things ambiguous. He leaves things in ambiguity. For instance, by the time the novel ended, I had a really burning question about one of the characters that we haven't seen in 10 chapters. And I'm like, so is their story arc just over? Because I'd kind of like to know what happened to them. And I don't get that answer. And I'm not going to. And my imagination is going to have to do a whole lot of work if I want to contemplate what happened to that character and how their arc in the story concludes. Then he did a twist and a turn with this one angle in the plot that really had me floored. I was like, whoa, I did not see that coming. And he did some really cool and interesting things with the ending of the story, because I can't think of any author that would have thought to do what he did. But I spent the whole novel, ready for, thinking that the conclusion was going to go in this direction, but the conclusion went in that direction. And I mean, I didn't see it coming. It was super interesting, but it kind of left me unsatisfied because I had more of a craving for horror. I was led to believe that where I was going to get something a little bit more horrifying than what I actually got. But what I did get was, super cool and super interesting. But I, really wish that there would have been more horror in the final product. I mean, don't get me wrong, there was definitely some satisfactory horror in this book, but not quite what I was expecting. And so, yeah, I give it 4 stars because it was a really addicting story. But I think that there's only one more young adult Christopher Pike novel that I'm really, really itching to read. And I think I'm going to read it soon. And then I think I'm taking a break from Christopher Pike's young adult novels. I have not read any of Christopher Pike's novels for adults. So maybe later this year I can get around to reading at least one of his adult novels. But I'm taking a break from Christopher Pike's young adult stuff because I hate to say it. I think that my taste has, matured, from my teenage self, because when I read this book, I was reading it to satisfy my inner teenager. And I felt like I was in like middle school or high school again while reading this book. And because Christopher Pike offers me that, vivid level of nostalgia, but I really don't like the fact that so many components of the plot in his writing are left in ambiguity. It kind of frustrates me, and I think that as a child I saw like artistic merit in that, but as an adult, not so much. I mean, I want like a more, finely tuned story than what Christopher Pike often delivers. And so I don't think that I'm bashing the guy, because I'm not. I mean, I have a love for his writing that that's never gonna go away, but I do think it's, time to admit that I've matured. My taste has matured, and I think I'm ready to move on. I want to start reading more, and I think that I'm gonna try to read other authors and other books, and hopefully I fall in love with someone else's writing at this phase of my life, just like I fell in love with his writing when I was young. Well, anyway, I think that's going to conclude this book review. Sorry that this video went so long. I hope that you guys enjoyed watching this. I hope you enjoyed my review of this book. And I hope you don't think that I spoiled it, because I left plenty of meat on the bone for you. Trust me. But if you guys have read this book, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you for watching. Horns up and peace out.